Namaste and hello, Rukus Avenue radio listeners. This is Priyadarshini G. Roy, your Rukus Avenue radio correspondent. We have a wonderful guest with us today, Mr. Indy Rishi Singh, and he's going to show off some of his amazing skills. Indy, take it away.
Oh, wait, no, there's too much pressure now. Oh my gosh, what do I do with the pressure? Oh my gosh.
Amazing. While you take a second to breathe, let me just introduce or reintroduce yourself to the Rukus Avenue radio listeners. Indy Rishi Singh is a well-being engineer. He co-runs a think tank integrating Eastern and Western modalities of health and technology and facilitates corporate wellness workshops with Fortune 500 companies, mindfulness workshops with students in schools and universities, and is an active volunteer locally and globally. Great interlude. Indy Rishi is also a co-founder of an educative collective Cosmic Labyrinth, which invites children and inner children to explore anti-fragility and curiosity through games, mythology, and relationships with the soil and the elements. He's on the board of advisors for an evolutionary orphanage in Varanasi, India. His current tech project is creating a well-being AI that practices and learns kindness and self-awareness, which is called NOLA.chat. So, Indy, I'm just going to welcome you to our special segment today where we are going to be discussing the 41st Lotus Festival, which occurred last weekend in Echo Park in Los Angeles, where you and I both performed. So I inaugurated the show with the American and Indian national anthems in front of many dignitaries, including the Consulate General of India and Bangladesh, as well as other local leaders and officiates.
Wow.
And you also shared your magnanimous talent and synergy with all of the guests that were present today. So please describe what your experience was, what your participation was like, and just your overall takeaway.
Yeah, wow. First of all, thank you for showing up and representing the divine feminine in that awesome way, and channeling the goddess energy. So thank you for that. And also thank you to all the people who facilitated that event happen. Like, what a great confluence of cultures and people coming. I mean, just awesome. For me personally, I was representing Cosmic Labyrinth. You can see it over my shoulder. This is a collective of educators, and I everybody's kind of spread out all over the country. So I was the only one in LA at the time. Otherwise, I would have had some of the other educators show up. But for me, it was important to kind of remind everybody about the inner child and how in South Asian culture, we revere the child. I mean, at least we're supposed to, right? Like, I mean, you see in Buddha or in Krishna and in Guru Hare Krishna and Sikhism, so many different stories we love and represent and revere the child. And so for me, it was really awesome to be able to remind everybody of this inner child and actually to help everybody embody it. And the kids, by the way, were looking around. I remember looking down at the audience and the kids were looking around like, wow, this is how adults could be. This is awesome. And the kids got to be kids, and not have to worry about, am I doing the wrong thing, So.
No, I think that it portrays the Lotus Festival very effectively because as I was speaking with Ms. Vasu Pawar, who I call Vasu Auntie, who's one of the community organizers and leaders for the 41st Lotus Festival. And we talked about how crazy it is that, of course, we have the American aspect of the summer fair that everybody enjoys with the outdoor experience and great Los Angeles weather and the food stalls and the culture and the performances. But specifically, as you mentioned, children, because there was a main stage for, obviously adults and teenagers, but there was a separate stage for children. And I thought that was so amazing. They had their own little changing booth, their own, setup. And I think that's so important for children to feel like they have a safe space where they can show their art and not be compared to like the big kahunas. And you see all these adults doing these, crazy intricate dances with months of practice and the kids have to go and compete with that. But they had their own separate stage where they were celebrated and they felt like, they belonged. And I think that's what's really important.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why what we're doing with Cosmic Labyrinth is kind of taken to another stage, because I feel it's one thing to like just do arts and to just study and get good grades in math. I mean, I was a good Indian boy getting straight A's, I had like a 4.6 GPA in high school, right? So how do you do that? How do you even get a 4.6? But like, one of the things was, we overworked ourselves, and we, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure a lot of folks who are listening to this have experienced some level of burnout, right? When it comes to over academic conditioning, right? Like
I had that last week. It was pretty bad.
Right. Yet, like what we're doing with Cosmic Labyrinth, for example, is how do we connect people and children, not just children, but the inner child, all of us, back to the elements, back to the earth, back to the air, back to the water, back to the heart, back to the, there's these like basic principles that now we're even learning in the medical science, and research is showing that when we do connect with the soil, when we get our hands in the soil, when we regenerate when we regenerate the earth and we're participating in that regeneration, we actually get healthier ourselves. Like our microbiome gets healthier, our mental health gets better when we're participating in volunteering or improving our community, right? Literally cleaning up garbage will make you healthier, So
I feel like organizing is very therapeutic. I know everybody was watching, I think that viral Netflix, I forgot her name, but she had her special version of how to organize. She was Japanese, and she had her special version of organizing things. I think Mary Kondo was her name.
That was a little OCD though, no?
That was a little OCD. didn't watch all of it. I think organizing your surroundings in whatever capacity makes sense to you is always beneficial, right? Sure. Whether if it is creating space for a garden on your balcony, whether that's a herb garden or just vacuuming once a week or just making sure your desk is clean the next time you go on it. It really helps your mental health. Yes. Just start off on a clean slate and you feel like you have some control, because I think in today's surroundings and environment where we're growing up globally, not just in our Indian American culture or wherever we are based geographically, there's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of uncontrollable factors in society today. And I think whatever helps you balance out your mental peace and wellness, whether that is through art, whether that is through nonprofits such as yourself, you do both and you do it very well. So I think it's important for Rukus Avenue radio listeners to be informed that it's not always about how academically smart you are. It's about how you're contributing back to society and how you make people feel at the end of the day. You can have all these accolades. You can have a 4.6. I'm getting my PhD right now. I can be all of these wonderful things on a list. Right. But if I don't make other people smile through what I can do with the platform that I have, then what is the purpose of it all? Because anybody can have a mic. It just depends on what you do once you have it and how you pass that on. You can't just be hogging it up all the time. So tell us more about your organization. I know we touched upon how you want to, reignite the child within all of us. But particularly, I'll let you take it away and share more about your organization and then how you use that to benefit other people who attended the Lotus Festival.
Well, I first would love to reframe that in the sense of, you said your organization, and I'm learning more in my own wisdom, my own personal growth, that when we operate from that space of ownership, personal ownership, it's my thing, I did this. Things for the collective don't get done very well. We're less apt to listen to people well, what their needs are, what their concerns are. It becomes just my thing. This is my thing. It's my organization. It's my company. It's my whatever, And I've even seen nonprofits failing because they get rigid in it being theirs. And then they're not open to other ideas coming, or even people who are suffering coming and be like, this is what we need. They're like, no, this is my organization. I'll tell you what you need, right? So first, I would like to state that like, anything I'm involved with these days, it's a collective organization. I'm practicing a lot of decolonizing the idea of having vertical hierarchies where there's got to be a CEO, a president at the top. Like that hasn't worked. How's the world doing right now with that structure of a president, a CEO at the top? It's not really helping our world right now, or our communities, or our mental health, our physical health. At this point, we need to start thinking mycelially, right? Like how can we be organizations? How can it be communities creating effective change where we're all sharing power? but are different kinds of power, right? Because your power, for example, right, Priya might be different than my power, right? But how can I support you for your power, and how can you support my power? And so Cosmic Labyrinth is just one example of how we're doing that with educators. It's like we're a bunch of educators trying to solve academic and mental health and social emotional learning issues in academia, right? Education is failing our children, right? So we're like, oh, how do we do this, right? Ourselves, how do we make it fun, but we connect not just kids, but parents and adults to the elements, to earth, wind, fire, water. In Ayurveda, these are big, right? Chinese medicine, these are big. And indigenous cultures, this is big. For some reason, in our Western science, we're like, oh, we don't care about elements anymore. Wait, what are you talking about? Like, they didn't just go away, right?
I will go on. Sorry to interrupt you. I will go on a tangent when it comes to something like this, because I feel like the West has been centuries behind, whereas ancient civilizations are concerned, whether that is Vedic science, whether that's Ayurveda, whether that's any other quote unquote indigenous population. I feel like it's looked down upon because they think of it as primitive, when in fact you go on to modern science and they're rediscovering the same thing that Vedic scientists have discovered centuries ago, you know? And it's very ironic how Indian culture has kind of penetrated the Indian society. Indian society and American society, but just on a global platform. I think when it comes to knowledge of the elements, when it comes to awareness of how the West has just realized the benefits of coconut oil, rose water, turmeric. And I was just mentioning this earlier. I grew up whenever we were sick or had the flu, my mom would make me haldi doodh with all the different cloves, and it was the nastiest concoction, and I hated it, but it was good for me, so I drank it. And now growing up, I see golden turmeric lattes at Starbucks, and I feel a way about it, because when I was growing up, it was something that either we didn't like or it served a different purpose, right? Nobody likes medicine, but it's all good for you, right? And so now the way it's been capitalized by the West, where it was taught for us maybe growing up to kind of delineate yourself from your roots and to absorb the Western society. Oh, and now the West thinks the East is fine, so now we're going to be okay with it. I think it's time for individuals such as yourself and again, not just me, but the collective to come together and learn our own history and to share that with the world. So I'll let you take it away from here. You talked about the ancient Indian Vedic tradition to build a conscious and sustainable community. It sounds really interesting. So please talk to us more about that.
So, for me, I've been really interested in systems and understanding systems because you can't change or evolve systems without understanding how systems work and how they function, whether they're local political systems or their foster systems or their educational systems or financial systems, right? We can see how these things are all being questioned now, right? Within the past few years, we're really in a deep state of, we should be curious. We should be leaning into this because this is a pivot point in human history. Whether we want it to be or not, we can just sit and watch our Netflix and be like, no, it's not. I don't want to be a part of it. But we are part of it, right? Our choices and not choices are a part of it, right? Even you not doing anything is a choice. That being said, I've been fortunate to be invited to be an advisor for what you're looking at behind me. It's an evolutionary project in Varanasi, right? And I mean, if you know anything of Benares, right? Varanasi, it's a very powerful mystic cultural node in the planet, right? It's been for a long time, one of the most ancient cities in the world that's still there, that's still functioning as an ancient city. And in this place, it's not even just an orphanage, right? It's actually like an orphanage, an after-school program, an educational forum for they're training local women to be educators, to go back to their communities and be educators. But all the kids who are adopted or come in and are coming in after school, they all learn Sanskriti, right? They learn Sanskrit, they learn Vedic chanting, they learn rituals, they do yoga. They also learn philosophy and debating. When they get to like high school-ish, like middle school, they learn how to debate in Mimamsa philosophy. My friends who run this organization, they invite volunteers from all around the world to come, and you could stay there and stay with the kids. But the catch is it's free, but you got to share your wisdom. You got to mentor the kids. And because they meditate, because they practice, they have really disciplined practices, these kids absorb. Like they're super curious. We don't really attach them to identities. We're like, you could be anything, right? Like we're not like, you're not this or Hindu or this. No. You're learning all these ancient practices, but you could be infinite. right? We're kind of letting them kind of feel that vibe. But
sorry to interrupt you right there, but I think you're just describing Vedic culture in itself, is that we are one with the universe and the universe is within us. And I think that philosophy is just being discovered by the God particle in Western science.
God particle.
Yes. And I believe that originates from us. And I'm so happy you mentioned the Vedic tradition, because when you talk about ancient Greek society and how they created psychology, debates, all these type of discourse, when in actuality, Indian culture had been doing that centuries ago with establishing the first university system where libraries were taught to talk about discourse, where you were not disgraced or looked differently because of a caste system. I think people took that in a different route in their greed for power, and it was misused, but it was not meant to kind of make anyone feel less than. It was more to give you a role and a path towards wisdom. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'll let you continue from there.
No saris unless you're waiting a sari, madam, please. So yeah, I mean, I also would add that note that in ancient India, right, when Indus Valley civilization, which is like had fantastic sewer systems that we still don't even have, like the British didn't even have it, up until barely recently, and Indus Valley civilization was like amazing, right? And they still like, we don't understand how they like existed. It's like, okay. Anyway,
even other ancient cultures had aqueducts. I mean, you look at the ancient Egyptian societies or African empires, and they were thriving. That's right. Why all the colonizers went and flocked to the other side of the world, because they were trying to figure out how they did it.
But mind you, too, these also places you'll see statues and a lot of respect for the feminine and women. And there might have been female rulers that have been kind of deleted from history so that we don't acknowledge the feminine and the feminine in its femininity, right? Not just being like, the feminine as a masculine, right? That being said, what we're doing here in India is one of the most phenomenal things I've been a part of. And my hope is that we could bring this to America and other places around the world. But I mean, American foster system is like a joke right now, right? I mean, there are foster homes, but the religious foster home, which is even more dangerous. They're not like religious, infinite religion. They're like religious, different, indoctrinating religious, right? And I'm like, how is there not a foster? Like in America, you get paid to foster kids. We're doing this project in India just on donations and support from people coming and realize what we're doing. And these kids, by the way, some of them have aged out. They're going on to be influencers in the communities they're growing up into because of what happened to them. They're like ninjas, they're bodhisattvas, right? Because of what they've gone through, they like have more energy and resilience to show up to be supportive to those who are going through suffering, right? And I feel like that's something we need to kind of start leaning into wherever we're at, especially after this couple of years where, I mean, I volunteer a lot with kids here in LA. And one of the things that I hear over and over again with them is that they are suffering a lot from having to disconnect from people over a year or 2 years, right? And like, we're like not even appreciating that right now. We're like, they'll figure it out. They'll go back to school. They'll be fine. Actually, no, it's still affecting them and it will continue to affect them unless we radically get involved and support projects that get kids into growing plants and food, or maybe connecting with other people in other cultures. Like we were at Lotus Festival, coming together, connecting with different cultures, dancing with each other's stuff, inviting each other to dance in our stuff. Cause that's maybe one of the drawbacks I had with Lotus Festival and a lot of festivals. It misses the opportunity to invite people into the culture, right? So when you got the dancers performing the Korean dance, right, or the Chinese dance or whatever, we're just watching them. And for me, when I did my thing, I really enjoyed having everybody join me, right? And it wasn't just about me; it was all of us dancing together and sharing bhangra and sharing some of our dancing, right, with people. And I feel we need to celebrate as a way of healing, right? As a way of growing and nurturing our connection is through celebration. Even these kids that we have in India, we celebrate. I mean, they work their butts off, right? They go on that Vedic astrology, doing all their homeworks and all that stuff. But we celebrate. Like it's fun to practice our Sanskriti, right? It's fun to lean into our power. It could be. It doesn't always have to be a burning out process for us to own our power and connect to our history, right? Or her story, her story. And non-binary story.
Right, just to clarify. I think you bring up a very important topic about reconnecting to our roots through spirituality, whether that be for us specifically Vedic tradition and giving back, because India had been not just the capital of the world at one point where it comes to culture and inclusivity, but also I just recently went to the Art of Living Center where Guru Sri Sri Ravi Shankar was there, and he conducted a meditation session. And he talked to, and my specific question to him during the question and answer round was that as young adults being raised here, we're plagued with a lot of different stressful factors that maybe our previous generations, like our parents, are not privy to. Mm-hmm. For example, when they went to university or were going into the job force or were thinking about getting married, their parents were able to pay them off because there was not an insurmountable amount of debt or inflation or just the rising cost of living. And now we have all these factors to think about. And that's why there's a decline in procreation and birth rates, because it adds to your stress and it adds to your longevity, to your health, to your mental health, your physical and emotional health. So how do you think the younger generation can connect towards meditation or joining programs to give back, such as the one that you represent, or just how can they be a part of this change from the very start, whether that's through childhood or through their parents or coming to festivals like the Lotus Festival and discovering different organizations? How can they be a part of this movement?
Well, I've been fortunate to, a part of my own personal research and inquiry has been going and visiting different communities, intentional communities that operate without money, like being non-money. Even Burning Man, right, for example, is a great example of within the community. Once you're in Burning Man, there's no money being exchanged, yet people are exchanging all kinds of goods without exchanging money. So, there's a lot of ways to exist, even if you don't want to apply to that matrix. There's ways to unplug from the matrix if you're willing to sacrifice certain things, right? Maybe becoming more agrarian might be one thing. But in terms of our youth and what's going on, generally speaking, you brought up Shady Ravi. But I also want to encourage this. We're in this really special moment that we need to recognize that just meditation and mindfulness is not enough. Like, we need to be active citizens, and children are actually some of the most active potential citizens, because if they want to do something, like not just kids, right? We're talking about like teenagers. It could go all the way down to like little kids to teenagers. If they want to do something, kind of like if they want to plant trees, for example, their parents are going to have to get involved to help them at some point. If they really want to do that, the parents are going to be like, fine, we got to help you do this, right? Or the grandparents go like, okay, we'll help you do this because we remember how to like plant trees or grow stuff, right? So if kids want to do something, they're really powerful agents in our democracy, right? Any democracy, right? They're a powerful force if they want to do something. So kids need to understand their power. That's super important. We need to start empowering them. What do you guys want to do? How do you want to improve the situation? Because this world, we're giving it to them, right? And if we're going to give them a world, like you were asking Shady Ravi, if we're going to give them a world, or like make sure you find your next cult leader, your next meditation teacher, your next guru to follow so that you can be happy. That's not going to give them the happiness. The happiness is when they are living in a sustainable, abundant world where they're not worried about how am I going to survive? How am I going to live, have a roof? How am I going to feed myself? Am I going to get fresh water? Like that stuff we shouldn't be looking to a guru. We shouldn't be looking to some democratic leader. We shouldn't be looking to some autocratic leader. We shouldn't be looking to some business person, right? Like, we got to look to ourselves. And first it starts with like figuring out, how do we do that ourselves? That's why regenerative soil projects are so important. Water projects, or maybe getting involved with some project to empower indigenous communities, because there's a lot of land back movements happening. Mind you, if you get involved with any of these different things, it has a reciprocal effect on your mental health, your spiritual health, your physical health, because you're involved in a community creating some potential abundance in the world. Abundance that connects with nature, right? So then it's like karmic, right? You're like now you're doing karma yoga, right? And that has a magical force. And just going to a meditation class every week is not going to build that karma yoga, because you're not taking proactive actions to improve ahimsa in the world, right? So, I mean, that's kind of my grievance with a lot of meditation, self-help groups and all these different things. They're not actually getting out in the world and shifting the dynamics of the system. Some of them are still using the system that currently exists and paying the bills in the current system and operating within the current system, and then talking about making a heaven. You can't make a heaven by operating within a system that doesn't allow heaven, right? So you got to somehow start mycelially planting seeds or like mycelially growing, regenerating the soil, transmuting the soil in our culture. And our culture has to evolve. And that culture has to be a culture of volunteerism, karma yoga, dharma yoga, right? Jnana yoga. We got to create a culture within our communities. But it's also coming back to all of it, it's got to be inclusive. Like it can't be like, oh, you can't pay. All right, so you can't be a part of this. Like, you know, and if we make it for kids, they can't pay anyways. So that's kind of a trick, at least for us with Cosmic Labyrinth. People are like, how are you guys making money? It's like, wait, we're trying to do this for kids and they don't have money. So we don't want, we want them to tell us who's a good educator. Like, let's democratize education. Like, how about the kids and the teenagers tell us who's a good educator and let's reward the good educators. That's how we're approaching it, right? And we'll just keep promoting and supporting educators. And maybe the kid is a good educator. Let's support that kid. That's a good educator, right? I don't know, Priya, were you like that? Because when I was growing up, I loved mentoring other kids, even though like I was their same age.
I was raised very differently. So long story short, yes. I found myself the person that everyone always came to. And it was overwhelming for my own mental health too, to always have to, be the mom of the group or like, okay, well, let's put our feelings to the side and what are the facts and how can we objectively handle the situation? And then we can address why we all felt that way. Right. And even in entertainment, because that's the world where I come from. And I see that on a constant basis. I did a reality show a couple of years ago with a bunch of different girls where we lived together. And it was so crazy seeing the different life experiences everyone else had, who they thought were mentors and who they thought were idols versus what I thought. And it's crazy because we were the same age. So I had to exponentially mature from a very young age. And initially you do resent it because you don't fit in with your peers. You think very differently. During recess, I would always talk to my teachers and the TAs, and it wasn't weird for me. I felt like an old soul and it was a natural progression. Even till today, I can talk to people across generations. Like I can sit there and talk to a child. And I can sit there and talk to someone, in my grandparents' age and feel equally content in both of those conversations.
Nice.
But then I'm also comfortable being very still within myself. So I think what you're talking about and your experience at the Lotus Festival and the takeaway from all of this is to follow your karma yoga, as you mentioned, and not just, yes, take time to meditate, take time to find the calm within the chaos within yourself so that you can create those ripple effects in your surroundings and take those actionable steps that will create change, not for just yourself, but for the future generations or the people in your surroundings, whether that's in work and family, relationships, in a garden, et cetera. The environment will constantly change. But I feel like if you're the constant, and if you have that positive energy, then it will naturally, people will be magnetically attracted to that vibe. And that's where these effects come from. And that's why our topic of started about the Lotus Festival and your association within the great work that I know we are not talking about identities and ownership.
We are doing the great work that we are doing.
that we as a collective are doing. And I thank you for coming on our show. It's been a really special, short, last minute segment, but I do want to thank you, Indy, for, agreeing to come on this special segment and speaking to us about your experience. Any last thoughts or words you'd like our listeners to hear?
Yeah, I would like to, you bringing up Lotus Festival in that sense. I do want to commend something they did well. They had different booths that were focused on CSAs for farmers, local farmers. They had projects to do regenerative soil stuff going on. They had voters registration booth that I got to connect to those folks because I really want to inspire non-voters to vote. And they were like asking if we could get some Hindi speaking and Punjabi speaking. I'm like, I can help to talk to some of the communities that are Hindi and Punjabi speaking that are not voting and get them to register and vote wisely, not just to vote on what name they recognize.
Not just to like peek over and be like, oh, okay, me too.
Yeah, me too.
In those surveys you did in school, like, oh, we agree. Oh, okay, we agree.
Yeah, whatever. What are you doing? So I really want to acknowledge Lotus in the sense that they were proactive in that way in creating these opportunities for people to connect with ways they can support their mental health organizations and community stuff. Or like I met a Filipino mental health community organization that was supporting people in the Filipina community, which is awesome. And so I want to acknowledge that, because I think we could do more of these festivals, and it shouldn't just be once a year, maybe like once a month, right? And we can have them all over LA. And that would be something that would really not just inspire people to connect to different cultures, but maybe connect to projects that maybe after they see it 3 times, the third time, they may be like, oh my God, I need to go do that project for water. Maybe it's for water reconciliation, or maybe it's for whatever thing. And it's like the third time they see it, but we need to, like, that kind of repetitive seeing of like things that matter to us at our heart and our soul. That actually is how we grow in our soul, right? We connect to these projects, we get involved. And then we also connect with community. We might meet our next girlfriend, our next boyfriend, our next husband, our next wife by working on a project that is regenerating the soil or growing food for people in food deserts, right? And we might meet our partner for life in those spaces, because we're not meeting them at a bar. We're meeting them in a space where we're moving in dharma together, fulfilling our karma together, rather than in a space of like, dissonance or like forgetfulness. Yes. Thank you.
I think we're in a place of mindfulness because we're paying it forward. And I think that positivity attracts your upcoming tribe, and it mends with your current tribe, and you move forward from there. So
we got our next dating app. We got our next dating app there. There we go. Right.
All right, Rukus Avenue Radio listeners, this is Priyadarshini G. Roy with Indy, and thank you so much for coming on our special segment today. This is Priyadarshini, your Rukus Avenue Radio correspondent, signing off. Until next time.